to hold everybody accountable for what they did as young people is ridiculous, and to run it out to, you change, you age out, as you guys are saying. To keep the lid on places, you really do have to have the motivation, the deterrence, and the motivation. And Kevin's case is a classic example of where they're failing, where there's nothing to motivate you. If you see a guy like Kevin stuck behind bars with no chance of getting out, why program? Why follow?
Exactly
Why follow
right.
the rules?
Exactly right. And that's, to me, that's like the most obvious tell that he is genuinely not the guy he was when he was in his 20s. Hi, I'm John Kiriakou, and welcome back to Deep Focus. For years, at least according to the Cleveland media, Kevin McTaggart fought in Cleveland's mob wars, doling out violence amid the push to control the city's crime rackets. He served as Danny Greene's close ally, made his money peddling cocaine, and attacked his rivals with vengeful force. He was arrested. A federal jury convicted McTaggart in 1983 of racketeering and other charges for his role in a drug ring led by Carmen Zagaria, an associate of the Cleveland Mafia family. Authorities linked the ring to 7 slayings, and a judge sentenced McTaggart to life in prison without parole, even though he was not directly responsible for any of those killings. More than 4 decades later, McTaggart is seeking a return to northeastern Ohio, saying he's a changed man. His attorneys petitioned U.S. District Court Judge John Adams for compassionate release, citing his extraordinary prison record, his failing health, and the pandemic. The truth is, he is a changed man. He actually has saved lives in prison, not the lives of other prisoners, but the lives of prison employees. So what happens when somebody is sentenced to life without parole but really does turn himself around? Is there no hope for anybody like that? Well, we have a panel today, a panel of people who really know the answers to some of these difficult questions. First, Cory McTaggart is the nephew of Kevin McTaggart, and he is spearheading efforts to have his uncle released on humanitarian grounds. Rick Harnes is a retired Federal Bureau of Prisons official and supporter of Kevin's. Adam Clausen was sentenced to 213 years in prison and was released in 2020 through compassionate release after serving 20 years. Since his release, Adam has been actively working in Washington on the issue of sentencing reform. And John Bartolomeo. John served 27 years of a 35-year sentence and has since built a following on social media. He was a close friend of Kevin McTaggart's. So, gents, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Well, Cory, I wanted to begin with you. Tell us about your uncle. He sounds like back in the day, and we're talking about half of a lifetime ago, he was a very tough son of a gun. Tell us about him and what got him tripped up.
Sure. So just to put it in perspective, so Kevin's been incarcerated since 1982. I was born in 1986. So just growing up, I'd heard, all the stories. People would recognize my last name and, tell me, oh, I knew your uncle. And so there was definitely a reputation. But then, as I got to know my uncle, through visiting him, corresponding with him, the person that I got to know and that has since then, really shown me a lot of support. Somebody's completely different. So it's been a long journey. And, kind of like you said at the beginning there, Kevin's helped people. He saved the lives of a nurse when he was in prison. But I think Adam and John would also argue that Kevin saved the lives of many other prisoners, just through his influence and the example that he sets. So, the man that Kevin is today is somebody who can give a lot to society. I think he gives a lot to mentoring new inmates, but certainly he's got a lot to contribute on the outside as well. So,
Rick, you were in the BOP for a long time. One of the things that struck me when I was in prison was when compassionate release was first introduced, every pedophile in the building filed for it. And it got to the point where it was so overwhelming that the warden's position was that nobody's getting humanitarian release or compassionate release or whatever it happened to be. And there were people who genuinely deserved it. There were people dying of cancer who ended up dying in their prison bunks just because they couldn't get a hearing. Is that what Kevin is facing, or is this a different kind of situation?
Well, with Kevin, it seems like the door's just been slammed in his face. You know, we had the COVID, had the pandemic. There were some compassionate releases that came out of that. There seems to be just a very much a lack of interest in addressing Kevin's situation, and I can't really figure out what it is, other than it looks kind of arbitrary from the Justice Department. They've done very little to make any moves to get him out. And you know, in my experience, I came in the bureau in 1989, ran across Kevin in 1994, and then from the rest of my career, I would see Kevin on different compounds, whatever prison I was at, and uh, he's he's the only inmate I've ever advocated for, yeah, because he presents himself as definitely a changed man from what I read in his pre-sentence investigation and everything you see in the media. As you indicated, he's not only a lifesaver for staff. He's and I think Adam and John can speak to this. You know, he is a peacemaker on the yard. You know, the way he carried himself was incredible. So I can't really say why they want. I followed along with his attorney, different avenues they were trying to look at, and finally this catch-all caveat of the old law just eliminated him from any possibility of getting out, even under compassionate release. So I don't know if I answered the question, but kind of danced around it a little bit. But that's the best I can come up with from here.
Adam, you were sentenced to this draconian 213 years in prison. When somebody is sentenced to that kind of time, it has to just crush the human spirit. I'll tell you a story. I had only been in prison for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and one of the Italians, I was close to the Italians when I was in prison. And one of them asked me to go for a walk. So there was a lot of snow. We couldn't go out to the yard. We were just going around the outdoor basketball court. And he asked me, "How much time do you have?" And I said, 30 months, and it feels like 30 years. And he said, "Let me give you some advice. If somebody asks you how much time you have, you tell them you have 5 years, because everybody has a longer sentence than you, and they're going to be jealous of you. But if you're sentenced to 213 years, or in Kevin's case, life without parole, that has to crush the spirit, does it not? How do you get past that?"
Yeah, believe me, nobody was jealous of the time that I had. I can
No,
promise you
no,
that.
I imagine not.
Coming in, I was 24 years old. I was just a kid, still really immature. When I came in with that 213-year sentence, I was incredibly fortunate to meet Kevin. And I can say this unequivocally, I would not be here today without his influence, especially early on, because I was at that proverbial fork in the road where, with a 213-year sentence, I could have just given up hope and, lived into the prison politics and all the negative. Kevin gave me an avenue out. Um, he opened up space, which is very valuable in prison, physical space, up in the gym, where I saw Harnes when he was the captain coming through. I saw the relationship, how he and Kev interacted. And I got to tell you, that greatly influenced how I decided to focus on doing my time, the investments that I wanted to make in myself to become a different person. Kevin gave me someone to aspire to be more like, right? And then he took it a step further. he was there to be the mentor, to be the guide that I needed for that first period. But then I caught up with him 10 years later at another facility where Johnny and I were with him together. And, everything that I ever sought to do that was positive, Kevin was right there behind me. To have that kind of influence, that kind of support is not something you normally find in prison. So Kev was that role model that I needed. I have the opportunity now to help other organizations vet cases for clemency, for compassionate release, for good time. And I can tell you that there has never been a person more deserving of relief than Kevin. He has earned that many times over. The fact that I'm here because the court believed that I had, achieved extraordinary and compelling reasons for my compassionate release. Kevin has so far exceeded anything that I ever accomplished inside that it's really frustrating that we have not yet been able to get him the same relief that was afforded to me 5 years ago now. So that's hopefully why we're here, to draw attention to this and get him that relief.
John Bartolomeo, you have built a successful social media following since your release from prison. Is that how a case like Kevin's should be handled, just by sheer force of getting the word out?
So first of all, I just appreciate you guys having me on and bringing a little attention to Kev's case, especially with Mr. Harnes as well. Because the proverbial other side of the tracks. And I mean, how do I go after Adam after that eloquent speech? I'm saying I should we'll just let Adam take this from here. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So, but no, I really appreciate it, and we're doing everything in our power because, like Adam said it better than I could ever say it in my whole life. Kevin was the impetus for anybody that's ever done good around Kev, because I watched guys like Kev. I didn't even know there was another way. I just thought, you went to prison, you're a hard guy. I came in a hard guy. I got a 35-year sentence. I'm a tough guy. Well, that's just the way I'm going to be, And guys like Harnes, who ended up, developing a great relationship with Kevin. And I know it's the rapport, because I've had that rapport with many, many other staff members, because Kev showed me that, hey, that's acceptable. That's a great way to do it. We're in this together. You have a short memory in prison. You become, we're allies. We're not enemies. We're there every day doing the same exact thing. We're all trying to listen. As I've grown older, I'm 57 years old. I know I don't look a day over 56, but I just try to get better every day. And guys like Adam as well, because I came into the picture afterwards. So I came into jail in '96, and I meet Kev and Adam in McKean, and that's a medium security institution. And these guys were, you know, trailblazers to me. Like, I was like, whoa, and I started to develop a rapport with staff members everywhere I went. And it's not like, people get, spooked by the term, oh, rapport with staff members. It's not about, everybody knew me as not giving information, right? Everybody thinks the people around staff members give information, but everybody had come to me like saying, hey, how you doing? Oh, you're friends with McTaggart. Oh, you're friends with McTaggart. And, it just opened up a whole new world. And I'm here today. And like Adam said, as a result of the teachings of Kev, my life has turned around. Kev was the impetus to that. And, I have, and Adam as well, because I met Adam and Kev at the same time. And Adam has done things that I didn't even think were possible. Have a position on the Sentencing Commission and trying to bring, awareness to Kev's case. And, the craziest thing about Adam and I is we have like connections with a lot of influential people, and we're trying to do everything we can, because Kevin should have been the first guy to get out. We should have followed after him, because his example, was the first example that we actually, started this, new philosophy on life. And I'm not just got 20,000 followers on Instagram, but I'm also a recovery coach, because Kev showed me a way to, you have to give back to people as well. So what I did was I gave a commitment at Power Recovery in Revere, and then they gave me a scholarship to become a recovery coach, and that's what I do now. So, but Kev is the impetus for all of this. We're talking about Kevin McTaggart, and when you were talking at the very beginning of the crimes that led Kev to prison, I didn't even really know half of that stuff. I knew some of the case, but that's not the guy we know.
Right. Right. Which brings me back to Cory. I mean, seriously now, Kevin sounds like the poster boy for compassionate release. That's why there is a compassionate release program. And if you look at the tenets that make up, or the criteria, I guess I should say, that make up the qualifications for compassionate release, one of them is helping staff when a staff member is in danger. Well, he did that several times, several different times. In addition to mentoring young prisoners, in addition to being able to work with staff and mediating and moderating and assisting people as they transition into the system. I'm stuck right there. So what's the holdup? Why aren't the likes of Kim Kardashian out there arguing his case instead of Mrs. Johnson's case, for example?
I think the biggest thing is just, and that's one of the things we're hoping to kind of get across with doing interviews like this, is getting that right eye. I mean, it's really, if somebody took an honest look at Kevin's clemency application and all of his accomplishments, I don't think logically anybody could make any other conclusion than this guy needs a second chance. I mean, Adam talked about he was 24 years old when he went in. Kevin was 26. He's 69. So it's 43 years. And the question that I've, spoken with attorneys over the years, it's like, do we really believe in rehabilitation, or is it, or not? I mean, because at a certain point you have to ask, I mean, what type of message is this send to the inmate population? Do the right thing, keep your nose clean, and you got nothing coming. It's a hard thing. And we're kind of, some of the biggest hurdles that we faced. So they had this compassionate release program, which Adam was the beneficiary of, as part of the First Step Act. Kevin is, because he's old law, he was sentenced prior to 1987. He does not qualify for the compassionate release. And we didn't figure that out until, halfway through. There was even, talks amongst the drafters of the First Step Act that, we didn't, necessarily mean to disqualify old law inmates, but, getting that correction in there with everything else on the legislative calendar, it's become low priority. So anybody sentenced prior to 1987 cannot get compassionate release. So our only avenue for relief for Kevin at this point is through clemency. So we put together, a wonderful clemency application, submitted it, and it's just a matter of getting somebody to take an honest look at it. We could talk about the aging out of crime. I mean, am I the same person at 38 that I was at 26? Absolutely not. Kevin at 69, I mean, just look at the track record. And then just some of the stories over the years. I mean, there's so many, and which ones do you highlight? It's just, it's sad, but I think one of the things is I'll never give up hope. Kevin is, family's always been very important to me. He's helped mold me into the person that I am, helped me through difficult times. And, I just like to see him be able to, he's got so much to give. And I think that there's a lot of people on the outside that could be beneficiary of his life experience, especially those that are at risk. So it would really be a shame not to see him fulfill that. But, with partnered with John, Rick, Adam, and you, John, we're hoping that we can get the message out so the right person can help us to get an honest look.
Rick, from the perspective of a not just a BOP official, but somebody who's in management in a federal prison facility, and speaking not specifically of Kevin, but somebody who's in the system and who is eligible for compassionate release, what exactly is it that the BOP is looking for, where a BOP official would recommend compassionate release?
Break it down real simply. Zero risk.
Zero risk.
You define somebody in the agency that has the onions to sign something like that is hard, and they're looking for the lowest risk factor they can possibly come up with. So you go back to their original crime, and that's usually where it gets stuck. They can point to any violence, and whether direct or just indirect, you're part of a group of people that were involved in something, and they can say, well, that's enough. So that is a deal breaker, for guys like Kevin, to get the BOP officials to sign off on it, because, like I said, they want zero risk factor. And the other part is there's such a convoluted chain of command. You see a warden on the compound, and you think they're actually a shot caller, but they're not. They got to answer to the regional director, and the regional director doesn't want to get sideways with the director, and the director answers to the AG. Goes on and on and on. So like I said, to find somebody with the onions to sign something and stand by it it's like finding a white tiger.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. When I was in prison, there was an old timer there, Art. I became friendly with Art. He was a jewel thief, and actually stole the biggest diamond that's ever been stolen, ever in recorded history. The Star of Marlborough, it was called. And he told me that even though he was eligible for parole, he was sentenced well before 1986, like decades before 1986. It never even came up. He just was never eligible. He said that he had one blemish on his record, and it was when he was at Leavenworth. He didn't eat all the food on his tray, and so they wrote him a shot. And that was literally the only shot that he ever had in almost 50 years in prison. But you become kind of, what's the word? Institutionalized, I guess. And you just don't think about what you need to do to try to get out. Now, here's a guy then, Adam. Here's a guy in Kevin who has done everything that you're supposed to do to try to get out, and hasn't gotten out. So with that said, do you place any hope? Should we place any hope in the fact that this president is so unpredictable and so willing to go out on a limb and make these decisions related to federal prisoners and release people who he believes have been screwed? Is there any hope in getting to Donald Trump personally, directly, and asking him to intervene in this case?
It's a great question, John. I would say I'm more hopeful now than ever before. Unfortunately, it hasn't been publicized what this administration has been doing behind the scenes. And I've been fortunate. I was in DC just 2 weeks ago, and the conversations are taking place about how to find those individuals who are deserving, how to create that safety valve, that release in a way that makes sense. To Harnes' point, administrators don't want to take a chance on somebody, right? But this administration has proven that they will. My business partner, Charles Duke Tanner, was serving a double life sentence when President Trump first commuted his sentence, and then back in May gave him a full unconditional pardon. And although few people have heard about it, that's a direct acknowledgement, not only that this individual was deserving of release, but acknowledgement of what he's accomplished since he's been out. So there is that means to get cases like Kev's in front of the president. And from what I've seen firsthand, if we can get this case in front of him, get him to look at it, he's a guy, he's very practical, right? He's going to see that Kevin is deserving. And I feel pretty confident that we can get him that clemency that he deserves. Again, it's just a matter of getting those eyes on it. And a podcast like this, we're hoping to attract those other persons of influence who can help get us in front of the president.
Gosh, I hope so. I hope so. John, I wanted to ask you about about the response inside prisons to legislation. I remember in 2014 sitting in the cell of my best friend in prison and reading the New York Times and reading an article about the Second Chance Act. And I said, buddy, did you read this article? It's about you. And he said, no, I haven't paid any attention. This was a guy who was involved with his stepfather and 3 other guys in a meth manufacturing operation outside Philadelphia. He was the only person to voluntarily leave the conspiracy. About 9 months later, the feds came in, DEA, they arrested everybody, and the stepfather told my buddy, Mark, I'll pay for your lawyer, but I won't pay for a rat. So you can't rat anybody out. He's not going to rat anybody out. He had no idea that at the time, everybody else in the conspiracy was ratting each other out. He was the only one that didn't take a plea. Everybody got 5 years and 4 months. For Mark, this was a first-time nonviolent drug offense, and he got triple life without parole. They sent him to Springfield. He repeatedly attempted suicide, and then they moved him onward to Butner. He appealed the sentence, and the sentence was reduced to 30 years. I met him at the halfway point. He had been in for 15 years. So I said to him, buddy, this article is about you. And he said, I don't even know where I would start. And I thought, well, I know a lot of stupid lawyers, and at least I'm as good as a stupid lawyer. So I wrote the appeal, and it was picked up by the Justice Department and referred to a law firm. And then the law firm represented him pro bono, and he ended up having his sentence commuted by President Obama. And just a year and a half after I was sitting there reading that article, he was released. And now he's the most successful, literally the most successful real estate agent on the Jersey Shore. And he has a new life, and his mother can sleep at night. And, things have worked out the way they're supposed to work out. What about for Kevin? I mean, there's got to be some sort of legislation or pending legislation or some federal program, something that can offer relief, not just to Kevin, but to people like Kevin, who for one reason or another have fallen through the cracks otherwise. They haven't been given a pardon. They haven't been given a commutation. They, for some reason, are not eligible for compassionate release. There has to be something out there. No?
So, I mean, it's a great question, interesting question, and it's a thought-provoking question. So what I would say is that just think about this dynamic. For a guy like me, I have 20 years in prison. I did 20 flat. See people go home. Now you still got 15 more to go. Time never goes anywhere, flies by, right? And now just think about that in the context of Kevin's case, in the context of Adam's case, where Adam didn't have a life sentence. He just had 5 million years. Me and Adam used to joke all the time. I used to say, just give me a good time, I can go home. My sentence will be up just with your good times. So, I mean, and we laugh about it and we joke about it, but in Kev's immortal words, we laugh to keep from crying. So that is what we do in prison, but we just get by every day. And Kev's got the wherewithal, but now you know what it does? It starts to grate on you, and it starts to play. Listen, I got out of prison. I got the best friends on planet Earth. Thank God. Because if not, I'd be sleeping in the Boston Common tonight. But here I got a nice apartment, I got a nice place, I got a nice job, I got a nice car because of my friends, because the people that supported me. And I can never take any left to my own devices, I'd probably still be sitting in a jail cell. Without like guys like Kev with the positive influence. I mean, people have blessed me. Kev is one of the biggest blessings I got. My life is the way it is today. People say, man, you're so inspirational. I get DMs from people, calls from people. People stop me in the street. That's Kev. Kev planted those seeds, you know? And like Harnes used to talk about Harnes all the time. Harnes planted those seeds. So Harnes plays a big role in all this too, because used to Harnes all the time, because they're the guys that created that first initial rapport where Kev said, hey, you could do that. Look at this. There's Harnes. He used to go over and see some of the wardens and he'd see like, hey, walking up to the warden, I'd see McTaggart and say, hey, McTaggart, what's up? You know what I mean? And that shows you like, wow, okay, there's another way to do this. So with all these laws and with all these things coming, it's it's such it's such a play on the mind all the time because you have hope. Think about where Kevin is right now. Yeah, like we have some very influential people. Adam is doing God's work. Adam is amazing. I hooked him up with a friend of mine, and I'll mention his name because he likes to help people out. It's Sean O'Brien. He's the head of the Teamsters Union. And Sean was able, amazing person, dear friend, has, opened up new worlds to me. Why? Because Kev taught me how to meet a guy like that and, the things to say and how to behave myself around people. You know what I mean? And so Kev's, the springboard for my relationships with a lot of people, restaurant owners that own, half of Boston. I'm saying people are like, I know this guy, well, Kev is the one that educated me to be ready to meet people like that, and we have a lot of power on our side, but, Adam is the guy doing the work. I'm just sitting here on a Sunday morning. I actually missed church today, well, I mean, it's a great place because I go talk to my mother. I lost my mother in prison. I lost my father.
Eric.
I lost my older brother. Yeah, and these are the things you'd never get back. And I have a lot of there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes subjectively that people don't see. That listen, they didn't get the wrong guy to go to prison. They got the right guy. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying I'm an altar boy. I did a lot of bad things in my life that led up to this. There is a way that, I think age just, softens you. You get a little wrinklier in the face, but a little wider between the ears. And the guy that's got the wisdom that passed it on is Kevin. I mean, Kevin's the guy that should be out advocating for me and Adam. He's the first guy. He's the trailblazer. And with the laws, I mean, I don't know, Kev's case is convoluted insofar as when it took place, when the sentencing was. And I just think we need to get by all of that and just do the right thing.
Yeah,
Start the
that's what it comes
process
down
to do
to.
the right thing.
Yeah, that's really the bottom line. Just doing the right thing. Cory, I wanted to ask you too. It would have been so easy, probably easier than what he's experienced over these decades. It would have been so easy for him just to take his sentence, buy his chair in the day room, watch TV for 40 years, and just mind his own business. What was it that made him not handle his time like that? What made him a leader in prison, where he's mentoring people and maintaining good relationships with staff? Why was it different for him?
I think so. Kevin wrote a really beautiful letter to his the judge that currently handles his sentence. When we did file for compassionate release, that basically kind of laid it all out there and where his mindset is. And I think from that, he said, 43 years ago at the time, I mean, I think it was 39 years ago, but he said, it was at the darkest point in my life, sentenced to spend the rest of my life behind bars and, nothing but all the time in the world to think about it, and he talks about how he sat there and with a lot of contemplation, a lot of soul searching. He walked into prison because of the status of his case and some of the people that were involved. I mean, he immediately was accepted by, leaders and the different factions within prison. And he had a choice to make. Do I do time the way that, people do time now, or do I do it my own way, or do I do the right thing? And he made a decision at that point that he was going to do something different. He was going to change the way that people looked at doing time. I think John and Adam could probably speak to this better, but I think there was a stigma when Kevin went in where it was like, self-improvement programming was like kind of like, it's just, you don't do that. Kevin came in and tried to change that. And I think he has changed that and showing that, hey, doing the right thing, helping guys out, like, you're going to get more out of this. So I think that's the decision that he made a long time ago. And he's stuck with it consistently. And I think that it's worth noting too. You mentioned your friend Art too. So Kevin's been incarcerated for 43 years, never received a single disciplinary infraction. And I think that's worth emphasizing, because that not only means that he never, overtly did anything, that would get him an infraction, but that also means that he never said anything sideways to a CO, never expressed something that, the fact that he's gone 43 years without getting an infraction, it's just incredible. We've received support letters from the prosecutor, the prosecutor who put him away. The FBI, one of the lead investigators from the FBI, has written a support letter. So we've got support from all sides. And now you kind of can see, like, hey, we've got the story where, Kevin saved the nurse's life. He's got support from the people who put him away. And they've even said, hey, his involvement was, negligible compared to some of the leaders in this whole thing. You put all these pieces together and it seems like a no-brainer. But that's why we're hoping, by getting the message out on a platform like this, that we can have somebody with some level of influence take an honest look at this and say, hey, here's a guy who has done his time. We're not disputing anything in terms of, his past actions, but we're saying, do we believe in rehabilitation? Do we believe in a lot of the studies that say there is aging out in crime, and that a 26-year-old and a 69-year-old are two different people? So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah,
if I could just interject for 1 second, because you said programming, right? People do program, but it's guys like me and Adam, like the worst of the worst when we get in there, that really want. I got 35 years, he got 200, whatever years. We're going to go in there and show them who we are. No, program is accepted, but for guys like us, it's not. That's for everybody else. We don't do that stuff. But Kev actually indoctrinated us in such a positive way through example that we bought into it. And we became, instead of problem children of the society, where Hans would have to say to his people, be careful, here's the cops, we got to go out there, there's going to be a disturbance. No, that we were taking care of the staff and saying, hey, listen, let's not make there a problem. It's going to be bad for everybody else. So Kev planted those seeds for guys like me and Adam, which is almost unheard of. So just that one point.
I have to agree that, and when you say programming, for our viewers who don't really know what that is, there are classes that are offered, whether they're offered by the prison administration or even by other prisoners classes that are recognized by the administration. You get certificates, you get points, you get different little chits in your file, and over a period of time those add up. I was only in for 23 months at the end of the day, but I took a class in like gardening and knitting and, just to pass the time. Well, over the course of years, that stuff actually adds up to something. Cory, I had a follow-up for you too. Like you guys, I'm as active as I can be on these issues of sentencing reform and prison reform and such. I'm in touch with a lot of people. Well, almost every single time I go to one of these events, I would see the mother and sisters of Ross Ulbricht. He was responsible for what was called Silk Road on the deep web, the dark web, rather. And he got caught. Essentially, he's a political libertarian. He believes in, free commerce and free speech, but it got to the point where what was being bought and sold was, weapons and drugs and prostitutes and whatever. And so he freely admitted to what he had done. It wasn't the goal of what he intended, but he got a draconian sentence and was going to die in prison. And he's a young man. He's just in his 30s. He was in prison for more than a decade, but his mother and his sisters lobbied everybody who would listen. And it took 10 years, but Donald Trump listened. And one of the first things that he did when he became president the second time around was he issued a full pardon for Ross Ulbricht. What kind of what kind of responses are you getting when you're going on shows like this, and people see the show or hear what you're saying? I mean, listen, it's so much time has passed for Kevin that in my view, it's not hard to make a compelling case. It's not like the guy just decided a year ago he's going to start taking classes and hope for the best. This has been going on for decades. So, what kind of a response are you getting from people besides you and your family going to the judge, besides you and your family weighing in with the lead FBI agent or with the prosecutor? What other people have you been able to bring in on this case who might be able to actually push it in front of somebody who matters like Donald Trump?
Yeah, so I mean, throughout the years, there's been a number of people. I mean, we've got the Sentencing Commission, or I mean, not the sentencing, the Can Do Clemency. We've got and what is it? The other name of the organization is escaping me right now, but there's been a number of organizations I've been, in contact with, and influential people, and unfortunately, the message has been very similar, and it's not one that I really like to hear, but it says, hey, the government doesn't like to come off of a stance that they make, so, here we are 43 years later. This was a major case in Cleveland, and, getting somebody to say, hey, we're going to right size this is just, it's a monumental task. So at this point, the feedback that I've gotten is our best avenue is from executive action through clemency. The league, we've looked at numerous legal routes. We've pursued numerous legal routes, but we're really hopeful that somebody that's not maybe encumbered with all the different legal intricacies and can make just an honest decision on something through clemency, could just do the right thing. So that's kind of, and I continue to shake the trees, basically that's kind of my thing. Anytime I see a case like Kevin's that comes up and, somebody's gotten out, I'm shooting out emails, I'm making phone calls, and I've been successful in, in getting feedback, different resources, but, sometimes it can get disheartening, but one thing is I won't give up hope, because I think that it's a worthwhile cause, and it's, and I'm hopeful that, with help from Adam, from John, from Rick, from you, John, that we'll one day reach the right person.
That's right. Rick, I want to ask you about BOP headquarters. Over the last, let's say, 8 years or so, there's been a lot of turmoil at the very top of the Bureau of Prison. There's been a string of directors, 4 in just the last 8 years, and it's like nobody really has been the perfect fit. There have been people who've been promoted up in the ranks and have been career BOP officers who have become director. There was a woman brought in from Oregon. She had been the director of the department, or secretary of the Department of Corrections. She didn't work out either. There was a military officer who had headed the prison system in Afghanistan. He didn't work out. What's the problem at the BOP, and is this hindering Kevin's case? Do you think?
That's hard to say. You look at the turmoil, and this is for me as post retirement. It's you know, every administration has this their big mix up. That they want a new AG, the AG wants somebody else. The Bureau of Prisons under the Department of Justice has always been the redheaded stepchild. It is the weakest part of the whole equation. They have no chips at the table. When it comes to that whole it's the FBI. They're the ones that the big dog on the block. So I don't really feel like the director's a much more than just a showpiece position, and it's not a probably not a good job. The people that they're putting in there, I think you got to be from the BOP to actually understand all the nuances and who's who and what's what, and so they bring in these outside people, and it's fraught for the people that have been in there for their whole career to be able to maneuver around them and do what they want to do. I think there's been decades of people being promoted up that were well out of their depth on a good day, and they're causing problems. The old heads are gone, and these I call them forward thinking groups, or they're looking left when they should be looking right. So let me speak a little bit about the BOP and this whole thing with Kevin and inmates like him. And I think Adam and John and you John will see this, is that it's a system of deterrence and motivation. You come in, you get your A&O handbook, your admissions and orientations handbook, and it tells you this is what happens if these are the rules you can't break, and this is what happens if you break them. And then you talk about programs, whether be educational or religious or vocational tech, that sort of thing. They're all designed to get you prepared for release. And the big topic now is getting people ready for release. If the Bureau of Prisons or the Department of Justice is serious about this, they can look no further than a case like Kevin's to say, is it really a system where you can, achieve these things and have a chance of getting out? Or is it just in name only, and it's a way to keep you occupied while you're doing your time? If I was held accountable for all the things I did when I was, between 18 and 21, I certainly wouldn't have made it with the BOP. So to hold everybody accountable for what they did as young people is ridiculous, and to run it out to, you change, you age out, as you guys are saying. I saw it over and over again. I've aged out of a lot of dumb shit that I did, so uh, if they to keep the lid on places, you really do have to have the motivation, the deterrence, and the motivation. And Kevin's case is a classic example of where they're failing, where there's nothing to motivate you. If you see a guy like Kevin stuck behind bars with no chance of getting out, why program?
Exactly
Why
right.
follow the rules?
Exactly right. And that's, to me, that's like the most obvious tell that he is genuinely not the guy he was when he was in his 20s. It's
Yeah,
obvious.
you could
Like I said earlier, you can fake it for a year or two or five, but you can't fake it for almost half a century.
exactly.
You can't. And that's what we're coming up
It's
on.
crazy. Yeah.
Adam and John, I wanted to close with the two of you. What recommendations would the two of you make as people who are facing draconian sentences? What recommendations would you make for people who are interested in this case, who want to help, and have the time to do whatever needs to be done, whether it's to write their elected officials, to push for additional sentencing reform, to write to the BOP, or whatever the sentencing place is in Big Springs, Texas, I think it was. What would you tell people? Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would say I want to touch on one other thing there, on the significance of, as I opened up, I said I wouldn't be here without Kevin. And what I witnessed over the course of the 10 years that we were at FCI McKean together, it transformed the whole culture. And there's research from Pepperdine now saying that what existed there resulted in a less than 3% recidivism rate for the people who went through that program, which is extraordinary. None of that would exist without Kevin's influence. That's what I'm saying. Like, he impacted the entire culture of a prison. He became something for others to aspire to. He gave people permission, like through his involvement. That's what changed the culture. And I have no doubt that Kevin on the outside will continue to have that same influence. And that's why Cory was able to get involved. Bernie Kosar, Cleveland legend,
No
right?
kidding.
Yes, and all over the news.
Oh my God.
His home. So a guy who's done 40 years in prison, you have this Cleveland legend saying, I'll take him into my home. Like that's how confident he is. That's how confident all of us are of the person that he is today and the impact that he will have on the other side. We need more guys like Bernie, others who have that influence, who have the courage to speak up, right? And the courage to reach out to your lawmakers, to reach out, hey, if you happen to know Kim Kardashian and she's looking for another case, like this is the case to get behind. You want a winner? Kev's a winner. Like this is a
Yeah.
winning cause.
Yeah.
I've
That's
never
right.
heard anyone say, well, I can't get behind this guy. He's amazing. So, like, that's what we need. We need people to step up and use your voice, reach out to those other people of influence. And hey, you have all the key people right here. Cory's done an amazing job quarterbacking this. And, so whatever contact, send them his way. Like that's what we need. We need those persons of influence to speak up.
That's right. And John, final word from you. What do you think? What can people do to help push this thing forward?
So, like Adam, and I got to follow Adam again, but like Adam said, so Kevin McTaggart doesn't know one word of Spanish. I want to let you know that, right? No, hold on, because I'm going to tell you something. I'm fluent in Spanish now.
Huh.
Okay. And I taught myself Spanish with a lot of help from a lot of people in the Bureau of Prisons. I devised two curriculums and I taught it at two separate institutions for beginning Spanish. And I had about 110 people graduate my class. That's Kevin McTaggart did that. I didn't ever done that in my whole life. I would have never took that step. And I learn worlds now by learning words, right? But that's something that Kev taught me. So, what can people do? Adam is doing the work. Cory is doing the work. Mr. Harnes, by being here today as an advocate for us, is doing the work. I, I have some connections that I've opened up to Adam because, like he said, it's a hands down winner. Just get all your money together. Just how much as we can get together. It's only going to be, we're going to make pennies on a dollar, but we're going to win. So I just think that anybody that champions a cause, I have 20,000 followers on social media. They champion my cause. Champion Kev's cause. That's a better winner. That's a sure. I'm even money, but Kev's, pennies on a dollar because that's a sure win. And I just think that anybody that has a voice that takes an interest, there's so much demand for this type of content. I've learned since I've been out of prison. Put yourself behind Kev. Try to get Kev out of prison. If without Kev, there is no Johnny Bott. There is no Adam Clausen. Like he got these two of probably the most extreme cases in prison, right? And made us, descendants of him. Bernie Kosar that'd be like Tom Brady saying, "Hey, Johnny Bott can get out of
Yeah,
prison and come to my house." Come on.
that's right.
What do you
That's
need?
right.
You don't need no more
That's
than
what it is.
that. But it's just,
And in
I'm
addition
here
to all
today
these
for Kev.
in addition to all these people we're talking about, Bernie Kosar and the judge and the FBI and the prosecutor, senior officials in the Catholic Church are doing whatever they can do to help him
Yes.
get there. There's no everybody has come together on this case.
Nobody
Everybody,
said
and
no,
everybody's
I don't think.
nobody has said no.
We'd
There
love
it
to
is right there.
champion this cause.
There it is right there. Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Cory McTaggart, Rick Harnes, Adam Clausen, John Bartolomeo. This is a very important case, and we're going to see it through. Cory, I'd like to write something about this too. I think this is so important. This is exactly what what legislation like the First Step Act and the Second Chance Act have been passed into law for.
Yes.
Is to help people like him. There shouldn't be cracks for people to fall through. So thanks so much for telling the story.
Yeah, and just finally, so just to put it in perspective, old law prisoners, which Kevin is one of them, there's less than 200 of them left in the entire system.
Oh my God!
Okay?
My God!
So those are the ones that have fallen through the cracks. They're the ones without the voice. We're hoping to give, and going along with what Rick said in terms of the BOP, staffing is an issue. We're trying to look for ways to cut costs. Well, certainly isn't one of the best ways to do that. Take some of these inmates like Kevin who have shown rehabilitation. Let's get them out of the mix. So I think it checks boxes on all ends, and John, we thank you for having us on here, and we hope that we can find, the right person who will take an interest here. I'll provide you with, I just put together just like a PDF with a short snapshot of this story. I can provide to you, maybe put it in the comments or something along those lines. And if anybody ever wants to reach out to me, I'll give you my contact information as well.
Thank you so much. I also want to apologize before we finish for my background here. I am at the southern tip of the Baja Peninsula in Mexico to shoot a movie of all things. When you get out of prison, you meet the craziest people, and your life takes these odd twists and turns. So we're doing this movie here. My connectivity is not so great. I'm afraid swarms of mosquitoes are going to pick me up and carry me away. That's why I keep swatting at the back of my neck. So I apologize for that. But in the meantime, I also want to ask our viewers to do me the personal favor of subscribing, liking, sharing. If you like this conversation and the others that we've had, please tell your friends about them. So I'm John Kiriakou. You've been watching Deep Focus. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you.